Did you feel this was the only way to get him out?
100%, 100%, yes. He will not leave. He's not the real president of Venezuela. No, it's not an act of war, it's an act of freedom.
Well, the past 24 hours have been pretty wild as the response to what the US did in Venezuela has been pretty interesting to say the least. And that's what I want to touch upon in today's video, as Canada, due to these actions, has a bit of a role in this. So without further ado, let's dive into the news. Now, for some reason, you have no idea what I'm referencing when it comes to the US and Venezuela and what took place and how Canada has any sort of connection to this, which we will get into in a bit. This is a brief little recap video of what took place over the past 24 to 48 hours.
As a Venezuelan, I woke up this morning to news that gave me hope for my country. My name is Germania. I'm a Venezuelan-American journalist and one of more than 8 million Venezuelans who have been forced to flee this brutal dictatorship. Overnight, the Trump administration carried out military strikes in Venezuela after months of escalation against the regime. In a dramatic operation early on Saturday morning, dictator Nicolás Maduro and his wife were captured and flown out of the country by US forces. After stealing last year's presidential election, Maduro has finally been removed. For decades, we tried everything. Nothing worked. The dictatorship used the full force of the state to jail, exile, and disappear anyone who dared fight back. For the first time in far too long, millions of Venezuelans inside and outside of the country feel hope that our nation could finally be free from the criminal organization that took power 26 years ago. But the system built by Hugo Chavez still stands. Regime leaders like Diosdado Cabello and Delcy Rodriguez remain in control in Venezuela, and the Chavista machinery has not yet fully collapsed. A truly free Venezuela would transform the Western Hemisphere. Millions of us would return home. Our country would rejoin the democratic world and the Western values that the majority of Venezuelans voted for last year. But if the regime remains in place, Venezuelans will continue to flee by the millions. Our path to democracy and the security of the entire region depends on the complete collapse of the Chavista regime. This regime flooded the region with drugs and opened the door to Iran, China, and Russia right in our backyard. We pray that the moment of freedom has finally arrived. Now we wait, and the world is watching.
Now, that may seem pretty wild, but actually a few weeks ago on one of the more famous podcasts, Trigonometry, they had a gentleman from Venezuela, or he formerly was from Venezuela, he's now in the States, coming in onto their podcast to talk about what's going on there. And Constantine, one of the hosts, had asked him about military force from the U.S. in Venezuela, and he had said that he hopes that's what happens.
Up until the 90s, Venezuela was richer than Spain. People don't understand that Venezuela is the largest refugee crisis in the planet. It's nearly 9 million of us who have left our country, nearly a third of the population. How come Iran doesn't have hyperinflation and millions of refugees fleeing? Iran is not a socialist country. In Iran, you can feed your family and live. In Venezuela, you cannot. Chavez was an international criminal drug dealer, the guy who started it all. What they didn't destroy, because it's not government owned, is the drug trafficking. It is tied to terrorism.
I was talking to one of my cousins, and he was saying that there's Hezbollah training camps.
Do you think that there's going to be some kind of military action in Venezuela involving the US?
I hope so.
Now, 9 million people leaving Venezuela because of this regime for the past 25 to 26 years is huge. A lot of the population has gone to the U.S. We have some that have come here to Canada. In Montreal, there's a small Venezuelan population that I know is there. But the reason I bring up Canada is because of how important a deal is with the U.S. This CUSMA agreement, the USMCA, however you want to call it, that's coming up for review, plays a big role in this oil and gas situation. And even though Trump has been very vocal about the drugs that are coming out of Venezuela, and that's why they're prosecuting or going after Maduro, oil is a huge factor. And we're not all blind to that, even though he does mention it plenty of times in his press conference yesterday. But this video came out like 2-3 weeks ago. And it did a very good job of breaking everything down. So just take a listen to this. It's about 4 minutes, but it's very informative. And then we'll take a little bit more of a deeper dive into it.
why does America even need Venezuelan oil? And I can kind of understand your point, because if you look at just total oil production, look, this is up until 2005, the US was there, Venezuela was there, Saudi Arabia was there. But as you probably know, since then, everything has changed. Look, American output has gone through the roof, way above Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela has gone basically to the floor, and that's kind of post-Chavez, Maduro. They're one of the minnows now, I think 21st biggest producer in the world. So again, that question, why should America care? Well, in the US, that big rise is largely down to this. It's down to the shale revolution. So you've got fracking all around the US producing extraordinary amounts of crude oil. There are various different types of crude in different parts of the world. There's actually kind of various different ways you can categorize it, but one way you can look at it is look at the kind of density. So you're basically looking at how thick that crude is. And when I say thick, I mean literally how thick. This is showing you global production broken down by the density of that oil. And if you look at kind of some of the refineries in America, so here are some of the refineries. There's one in LA there. These are the 10 biggest. You've got some up here around kind of towards Canada. We'll kind of come to that in a second. But a lot of them are down there, kind of Texas, Louisiana, on the coast. And here's the critical thing. These refineries are primarily set up for heavy oil, for taking that gloopy stuff and turning it into gasoline and all of the other different products. But here's where things get interesting. And remember that chart I showed you a moment ago, the one which showed kind of shale oil and how it kind of went through the roof? The oil that's generally produced with shale oil, the fracking oil, that comes out of the ground mostly in the light form. So if you look at the kind of imports coming into America, in recent years, even though America is producing so much oil, more oil than it's ever produced before, it still needs to suck in loads of oil from overseas. And the type of oil we're talking about, it used to be, it's mostly heavy crude. It used to be only 12%. So only 12% of imports were heavy, gloopy crude. Now, it's about 70%. So 70% of the oil coming into America, which it needs to basically keep its economy going, is heavy crude. And the upshot is, even though America is producing more and more oil, the imports, this is showing you imports of oil into America, are still really high. And if you break down those imports by the country that stuff is coming from, well, there's Venezuela, and it used to be a decent slug, actually more coming from Venezuela just about than from Canada, just at the turn of the millennium. But now look at what's happened since. Right now, Canada has gone from 15% of all of the US imports of oil to 61%. 61%, and Venezuela is basically next to nothing. But here's what's tantalizing, and here's the reason I think that a lot of people are looking towards Venezuela and thinking, well, there's more to this than just drugs. Look at total oil reserves around the world. The higher these bars are, the more oil there is in the ground, so that hasn't yet been taken out of the ground. So there you've got Saudi, Iran, Iraq, all of the usual suspects. But the biggest of all, and this is according to various different sources, the biggest of all is Venezuela. And what's that oil? It's the heavy, tarry stuff that you might well want to put into those American refineries. And there is really only one other place in the world that has a kind of serious amount of heavy oil other than Canada and Venezuela. And lo and behold, guess where that is? It's Russia.
Now, what's important to note from that video is that the heavy crude that he's talking about is what is referred to as bitumen. And that's exactly what Danielle Smith is trying to get piped to the West Coast and then shipped to the Asian markets, as well as increase its shipment to the US. We know how much they rely on it. And now, with Carney being kind of flaky on the idea of a pipeline, it's looking like Donald Trump is again going around them and now focusing on Venezuela. And even a American YouTuber, podcaster, whatever you want to call him, Twitch streamer, he emphasized how much Carney needs to get a pipeline and that this is something that he should have been doing.
We have major heavy oil refineries in America, and you need heavy oil to keep them running, and we import it from two places. Previously, it was Venezuela and Canada. Ever since the increasing conflict with Venezuela, it's become only Canada. We get 61% from Canada. This is not the entire reason for this, but one major thing that's coming up is the USMCA, US-Mexico-Canada agreement negotiations. They're in 2026. Canada, this is no longer led by Trudeau, but their largest leverage point is heavy crude, which is what they export to America. They have not yet built the pipelines. One thing that Carney should get on, by the way, if he's trying to get out from under the US's thumb here, they need to build heavy crude pipelines to be able to export to other parts of the world other than just America. Because anyway, this is to get rid of that leverage.
And this is exactly what Trump is doing. He keeps removing all of the leverage that Canada potentially has on them, especially with the CUSMA or the USMCA review coming up. He keeps talking about Greenland for the critical minerals, even though we don't even have a road to the Ring of Fire currently. Now with the Venezuelan crude oil, he's can focus on that and not so much on Canada. And maybe people weren't thinking that this would ever be a situation that could happen. Maduro should have maybe expected this because he did challenge Trump back in 2020, as this recent video has kind of popped back up.
El gobierno de Donald Trump, en una acción extravagantemente extremista, vulgar, miserable, bueno, lanzó un conjunto de acusaciones temerarias, falsas, y como unos cowboy racistas del siglo XIX le ponen precio a la cabeza de unos revolucionarios que estamos dispuestos a combatirlos en todos los terrenos. Aquí estamos nosotros dispuestos a combatirlos en todos los terrenos.
Now, as I mentioned, that video was back from 2020 when Trump was just ending his first term, and I don't think Maduro thought that he was going to get a second term because his tune started to change a little bit. And we know this because just before the strike, a few weeks ago, they had a press conference and Trump had this to say.
Maduro offered everything in his country, all the natural resources. He even recorded a message to you in English recently offering mediation. What should we do in order to stop that?
He has offered everything. He's offered everything. You're right. You know why? Because he doesn't want to f*** around with the United States. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, so Trump kind of saying F around and find out. But since all of this has taken place, we have heard some of the Canadian leaders, some members of the NDP have been vocal about how they don't agree with what Trump did. We've had Pierre Poilievre come out and congratulate Trump for his success. And then Mark Carney took 11 to 12 hours to come out with this response, which has been getting a lot of mixed messages, a lot of negative ones, I would say, where he says one of the first actions taken by Canada's new government in March 2025 was to impose additional sanctions on Nicolas Maduro's brutal, oppressive, and criminal regime, unequivocally condemning his grave breaches of international peace and security, gross and systemic human rights violations, and corruption. Canada has not recognized the legitimate regime of Maduro since it stole the 2018 election. The Canadian government therefore welcomes the opportunity for freedom, democracy, peace, and prosperity for the Venezuelan people. Now, I'm not going to read the rest of this, but what is said here is something that was echoed in the press conference with Trump today and Marco Rubio, where Marco Rubio emphasizes that Maduro's not really recognized since Trump's first term as a leader by a lot of people.
Well, I don't have much to add to what you've heard now, other than the following points. Nicolas Maduro was indicted in 2020 in the United States. He is not the legitimate president of Venezuela. That's not just us saying it. The first Trump administration, the Biden administration, the second Trump administration, none of those three recognized him. He's not recognized by the European Union and multiple countries around the world. He is a fugitive of American justice with a $50 million reward, which I guess we saved $50 million. And
make sure.
Yeah, exactly. But
don't let anybody claim it. Nobody deserves it but us.
But I want to be clear about one thing. Nicolas Maduro had multiple opportunities to avoid this. He was provided multiple very, very, very generous offers and chose instead to act like a wild man, chose instead to play around. And the result is what we saw tonight. The other message here is the following. You have a guy, like many people around the world, they like to play games. You have a guy who decides he's going to invite Iran into his country, is going to, do the confiscation of American oil companies, is going to flood our country with gang members, is going to take Americans prisoner and try to hold them for hostage and trade them like he was able to do with the Biden administration. Basically likes to play games all this time and thinks nothing's going to happen. And I hope what people now understand is that we have a president. The 47th president of the United States is not a game player. When he tells you that he's going to do something, when tells you he's going to address a problem, he means it. He actions it. I can tell you, I've watched this process now for 14, 15 years, been around it. Everybody talks. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. When I get there, we're going to do this. We're going to take. This is a president of action. Like, I don't understand yet how they haven't figured this out. And now, if you don't know, now you know. Because this is the way it's going to play out. And I think people need to understand that this is not a president that just talks and does letters and press conferences. And, you know, if he says he's serious about something, he means it. And this is something that was a direct threat to the national interest of the United States. And the president addressed it. There's a president of peace, by the way. I told you what I just said earlier. This guy had multiple opportunities to find his way somewhere else and figure out another. He could have been living somewhere else right now very happy, but instead he wanted to play big boy. And so now, you know, he's got other sets of problems on his hands. And but I think that the message here should be for the world. Look, the president doesn't go out looking for people to pick fights with. He's not generally wants to get along with everybody. We'll talk and meet with anybody, but don't play games. Don't play games with this president's in office, because it's not going to turn out well. And so I hope that, I guess that lesson was learned last night, and we hope it'll be instructive moving forward.
Now, the sad part is, even after hearing what Marco Rubio just said there, you're hearing the outcry from the people from the past 25, 26 years suffering from this regime. We all know that Maduro didn't abide by the latest election results, where the opposition leader, Maria Machado, she clearly won, and he just ignored it. Even with all of this knowledge and everything that we know, the people on the left, and unfortunately the predominantly white ones, still find a way to complain, blame this on Trump, say that Trump is doing something bad and how this is now putting us in a wartime position, or putting the states in a wartime position. But as you heard from the opener, that Venezuelan guy said, this is not an act of war, this is an act of freedom. And you have Venezuelans in Venezuela, in the US, and in Canada, all praising what Donald Trump did.
Yeah, just a quick question. Just so we're all aligned in 2026, we know we're not the good guys, right?
Going into another country with enough firepower to take their president, and then saying you're going to charge their president with criminal charges in our country is such an insane breach of sovereignty. I'm like so shook.
Donald Trump, yo sé que posiblemente tú no vayas a ver este video. Yo lo sé, lo tengo claro. Pero coño, no nos puede quitar el privilegio de mostrarnos una foto de ese coño de su madre tras las rejas, ¿vale? Por favor, te lo pedimos. Hoy es el mejor día de nuestras vidas para todos esos venezolanos. Dios mío, hoy es un día bendecido que nunca vamos a olvidar.
Yo creo que nadie entiende la emoción. Pero desde mis 7 años me tocó vivir en un país donde me arrebataron mi infancia, me arrebataron todo.
I came in this country when I was 10 years old, and ever since I was born, every single person in power of the country has abused us and abused of their power. We have been living in a dictatorship for about 20 years. So I can tell you, this feels like a breath of fresh air.
Esta señora que no ha parado de llorar desde que llegó, viene en pijama, como lo pueden ver, todavía ella está. Cuénteme un poco su reacción, amor. Cuénteme un poco qué siente en este momento.
Esto no tiene comparación. Gracias, Dios mío. Gracias, Dios.
Now, after seeing that, who are you going to be more on the side of? The Venezuelans who are overly excited, or the people with the Trump derangement syndrome? Because these folks on the left here are just going on and on about how he's breaking international law, how he didn't get no congressional permission to do so, how he's going into another sovereign country, this, and that. Yet you didn't hear a peep from them when Obama was doing strike after strike on Libya, on Syria, on Pakistan, on Somalia, on Yemen, you name it. Obama did, I think, the most amount of strikes. Biden also did a bunch of strikes. Bush did a bunch of strikes. Like, you didn't really hear too much about that. Yet Trump goes in, doesn't lose a single American soldier or life, and brings the guy back alive, which clearly he could have ended Maduro's life if he really wanted to. and now is having him be charged in the US. And people are all up in arms protesting in New York, this, and that. When you have folks there in South Florida who are Venezuelan on the streets partying. You have people here in Montreal partying. You have people there in Venezuela partying. It's just such a disconnect. But with all that being said, let me know what you guys think about all this. Hopefully you enjoyed today's video. Again, like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.